This might be your next it design, and this graphic style is easy to adapt to any theme. And with this whole Jesus/holy graphic, this could be your next sold out tee. So I'll walk you through how to go from this to this. Oh, and there's a discount code from my website in the middle of this video, so happy hunting. Working in Photoshop, it's going to be 3000 by 3500 height at a DPI of no less than 350. Create artboard. So using these rulers, I'm going to go ahead and drag out individual guidelines. Now these guidelines are going to be used as a guide for the custom font that we make. If you don't see your rulers, go up to window and press show rulers, or just press Command R and your rulers will pop up. Next, I'm going in on a new layer with a small red brush. Within Photoshop, it's just the classic brushes that you guys see, and sketching out my font. Now fine, this is a good base, but me, I like to play with it, so I'll usually make it smaller by pressing Command T, transform, or right click and press perspective, and play with the perspective of the font until I have a good base to draw my final font over. Once you have your final sketch, turn down the opacity of that layer and add a new layer on top, and then go in with a black brush, same size, and just line your final line work for your font. Take your time as you do this, and also add some smoothing for a more polished effect. We're going for a cursive, luxurious look, but I also want it to have a grunge feel, so I'm not too worried about what my shapes look like for each letter. I just want them to have this certain aesthetic that's going to match this brand. Once you have your type all drawn out and all your lines are close, go ahead and go in with the paint bucket tool within Photoshop and fill in your font. And once you're happy with this, make sure you fill it in one more time to get all the stragglers of all the little shapes that weren't filled in. And don't forget to go in with this brush, same color as your line work, and fill in any inconsistencies. Congratulations, you now have custom type. Remove the guidelines and any layers of the sketches as we don't need them now. Just keep the layer with your final line work. We'll go ahead and just drag in our image for our foreground and then remove the background. I'm just going to go ahead and use the magic wand tool. Reason being is because this is perfectly isolated on a white background, and I also have a good contrast. So if I press Q, you guys can see how good the AI, Photoshop image selection is, because it's an easy image to select. Next, I'm just going to go ahead and make that into a mask and convert that into a smart object so it's ready to be manipulated. I'm going to go ahead and introduce a new layer and then go in with the ellipse, selection tool, ellipse marquise tool, that's what they call it, and hold shift and make a perfect circle. Grab a color and fill that in using the paint bucket tool. I'll go ahead and add in a new artboard and also introduce this image of a rosary so we can reference it as we go along and make this custom rosary. Now, I won't complicate this rosary too much, so it's going to be just one big circle and then one small circle. And then I'm just going to go ahead and hold Option as I'm using the movement tool or move tool in Photoshop to make duplicates as I go about this. You can go ahead and press Command C, Command V consistently, but that will drive you insane. And the movement tool allows you to make duplicates in the direct area that you want. So again, you just hold Option and drag whatever you're moving, and it'll make a duplicate. Now that we have our chain complete, I'm going to go ahead and just make this image of this rosary larger and cut it out using the pen tool, which is set to path. Now that it's set to path, I'll just go ahead and trace this perfectly and then go up to selection and then make a mask, convert that into a smart object and drag it onto the original artboard. Simply press Command T or transform to make this a bit warped and fit where your rosary ends, and you can see it coming together. Now that we have our rosary up to this stage, it is now time to add an effect so our beads look a bit more realistic. So I'm just going to find one bead and right click and head over into blending options, and I'm just going to put up the screenshots of every single effect that I added on, just so it's easier for you guys to follow rather than me just talk, because I had to go through a bit of trial and error to get the perfect blend. So we started off in color and I just set the color to gray, followed that with a bit of an inner glow. These are the settings. Next, with an inner shadow, I added a bit more depth. Lastly, I went ahead and added a stroke, but instead of setting the color to just a solid color, went ahead and set it to a gradient, and the gradient was just set to the basic one, which gave it this really cool 3D effect. Now to apply the same effect on every other bead, just right click, copy layer style, select everything, and then press right click again and then paste layer style, and it'll apply it to everything. I went ahead and grouped all the beads together. And then from here, I went ahead and added a single blending options, which is just a bevel emboss. Right click, went into bevel emboss, and then I put on this setting to make it look a bit more, I guess, rounded, realistic. It doesn't really do much for this. I think if I added it individually, it might have been a lot better, but I guess I just wanted a bit more depth. Convert all those beads into a smart object in case we need to move them around, and then added a mask. Now this mask, I went in with a black brush, just set to a soft black brush, and then removed the excess so it looked like the hands are actually holding the rosary. For the meantime, I also turned down the opacity of the actual design layer that has the beads on there so I could clearly see exactly what I'm removing with this mask and this black brush. Let's go ahead and add some depth. So I went ahead and added in a new layer once I was happy with my mask, and with that new layer, I went in with the exact same soft black brush and drew in where I think the shadows would be. I'm not taking this too seriously because one, we're going to put a threshold on this whole graphic, and two, most of this is going to be hidden. It's just little details like this that help you elevate the brand design or help you stand out in terms of how completed your graphic look. First thing I did was turn up the opacity of the original beads layer and then drop the opacity of our new layer that has our shadows for the beads. And now you can see the design coming together. Let's group everything but the text. So that's everything grouped but the text. And let's go ahead and add a mask onto that group. Once we have a mask on that group, we're going to go in with a black brush to remove some excess of the cut off limbs. Again, one thing that I hate is cut off limbs. Cut off limbs on your designs make them look incomplete. I went ahead and set that brush to dissolve because it's going to be printed, and when you print anything and it has some form of opacity, it doesn't print well. So make sure you use dissolve when you're removing limbs or things that are going to be printed in the main area to make it look a bit more complete. Now this is fine, but I want to go ahead and fill some white space. So I added a new layer and then added in this custom font, hand drawn, that just says "Save Me Lord." But I think Lord looks like Lond for some reason. But again, that's the risk when it runs. That's a risk you run when you go ahead and make custom type. Next, I'm going to go ahead and add in the rosary to fill the white space on the left and right of the hands, and then just press Command T and then right click and press perspective and make it look like the rosary is facing inwards, almost like they're surrounding the hand. Because I'm gonna go ahead and add a threshold to this whole graphic, the black font is just gonna show up as black, and I don't want that. So I'm gonna go ahead and press right click, head over into blending options, but this time I'm gonna be using the ATL layer styles or ATL motion layer styles, just so I can have a bit more depth. Again, these are linked in the description below, and I'm just gonna use this one and turn off the drop shadow and the stroke so I have this to work with. I'll apply the same layer styles on to the Save Me Lord, but this time I'm going to go ahead and go into the actual blending options and then add in a outer glow and make this normal, set this to very large, and then add in a bit of noise, almost like it's cutting out the image of the hands. Again, we're adding a threshold, so this will make sense later. Let's go over into adjustments and let's go ahead and press threshold. And now we can go ahead and start adding in noise and any final details so our graphic can look complete. I play with this threshold one to see where my shadows are and where I need to add noise. So these hands, I'm going to go ahead and convert them into a smart object. Then I'll go to filter, noise, add noise. And then from here, I'll just play with this adjustment until I'm happy. Don't want too much. This is perfect. I'm going to repeat that for the crosses as well. So I'm going to group those and then convert those into a smart object. Head over to filter, noise, add noise, and then play with that until I'm happy and then press OK. I also want to make another adjustment. So I'm going to go into the blending options of the Save Me Lord text. And in these blending options, I'm going to play with these until I have some sort of depth. So that requires me going in and adding in some inner glow. So I just set the color to white, and I'm going to go ahead and add in an inner shadow first, and then add the noise, and just copy these settings if you want this certain look. So all it is a color overlay and an inner shadow, and then press OK. Let's go ahead and introduce a new layer. Go to select, color range, and then go to shadows, press OK, and fill that layer in with black once it's selected. And now you can go ahead and turn all this off to see if it's working. And officially now we have our graphic cut out. So now it's time to color. First, you want to go ahead and select the layer that you want to color in. Hold Command and select that layer, and it will select it for you. So hold Command, select it, and it will select that layer for you. While it's still selected, go ahead and add in a new layer and fill that layer in with whatever color that you want. I want a sort of light yellow / skin color, so I'll just fill that in. And now what proper practice is basically adding in a new layer every single time you color. One, you're basically creating your own separations for coloring or screen printing if you do it that way. But for the sake of this video, I'm just gonna go ahead and start coloring and adding shadows where I see fit. So to add shadows and highlights and to paint, set your brush to dissolve and make sure you have a very soft brush, and then just start coloring. Because it's set to dissolve, it's going to match the placement of the threshold and grain. So the grain / noise and threshold is going to look like a brush when it's set to dissolve, which allows you to keep consistency within your graphic and make it look a bit more complete, as you see here. So when I'm brushing on this, it looks like it is set on a noise / threshold effect. Perfect for any graphic that uses noise and thresholds. Spend your time coloring and making sure that your design is to your desired taste. Add in highlights, add in shadows. Just make sure it looks cool. And that comes down to as much detail as you put into it. For example, the original image has a lot of values which allow us to get this sort of cool effect once we add the threshold. So apply those same values back in once you're coloring. So if your image has highlights and shadows, make sure to add those in. Just to bring it all together, I'm going to go ahead and add a layer at the very bottom of all our color layers and our graphic with our black layer on there. And I'm going to go ahead and go in with this yellow to add this sort of aura to the actual hands. Again, it's some praying hands, and I think this aura brings the graphic together. For the back graphic, I just went ahead and copied the ground from the original group with all our original graphics. And then I'm going to go ahead and add in this Jesus image. And then we'll apply the same exact effects that we did to the front. So I'm going to start with the threshold, go into the noise for the Jesus image, add in a bit of noise so we have a bit more detail. So that's filter, noise, add noise, and then add the noise as you see fit. Press OK. And if that looks good, continue. Following that, I'm going to go ahead and add in a new layer, and then I'm going to right click and go into the blending options and add an outer glow with the same exact effects as a Save Me Lord text. And then from here, I can go in with a brush and just draw in a custom font. So if I'm drawing it in with the blending modes still attached or the layer style already added, it will already apply the effect live view or live time, which is a really cool way to see your graphic come to life. Now, this vintage was just trial and error. I don't think I'm 100% happy with it, but when it comes to the back graphic, sometimes I really just don't care. So it's more so about filling the space, especially with graphics like this. And once you're happy with your placement and all your designs, go ahead and add in a new layer at the top and then select color range, fill that layer in with black, same steps as the front. Don't forget to color in your image. If you do one color, most times people leave the back graphic black, but for me, I like to color the back graphic. It's a bit more expensive when you go to print, especially if you're screen printing, but having a bit of color is always good and it makes your design pop a bit more. I also added in these custom tiers using a pressure sensitive drawing tablet set to white, and I just thought it added, that flair to the back graphic. Now let's go ahead and add in a hue / saturation and drop down the saturation dramatically to make the colors look a bit more washed / faded. Next, I'm going to go ahead and add in a texture. We'll set the blend modes to color dodge and then just clip that all onto our graphic and apply everything onto the front graphic as well. So just go ahead and copy that all over and just copy it onto the front graphic. If you want a more dramatic look, set your blend mode to linear dodge or linear add. All that's left is to export these as a PNG and drag them into Illustrator to place on our mockups. I'll be using the mockup pack from my website, this one right here, and just grab the hoodie without the kangaroo pocket and also the classic t-shirt and copy and paste them into this new file. I like this pack because it's really easy to change colors. It's directed at almost anybody getting into Illustrator. So just using direct selection, I can select the color layers and then change them to a white and then drag in our designs. Once our designs are dragged into Illustrator, all we have to do is basically just resize them to fit each mockup and you're complete. That's your design done. Again, all linked assets will be on my website for this graphic. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Love you. Peace.